water bowl, but Rambo and Robin aren't happy because they're scared of the water. But just scrub their bowl out to give them fresh water again. Horses Anonymous over there hoping to get more food, but I've got to do some more mucking out of the stable for the night and filling up hay bags, although they're not really eating their hay nets at the moment, so I'll probably just fill up their hay feeder. What's up, Paddy boy? Sun is nice. Bella's having a little snooze on Fat Boy's bottom. Well, she was. I'll try to keep an eye out on the hose so that it doesn't go crazy. Bill's living in hope. And I might give him something nice. So is Fatty girl there. Alright, I've got to go and turn that hose off. I'll take the shortcut. Hi everyone, well it's Roz here, and today I wanted to talk about fearing your horses. I watch a lot of videos, and it seems to me that it doesn't seem to matter whether you've been in horses for less than 6 months or you've been in horses for 40 plus years. I think the size of horses themselves can create a certain amount of fear in people, because we all know that they're large, strong creatures and can inadvertently cause you a lot of serious harm if things go wrong. So as you've probably realised, I spend a lot of time outside with the horses and in the paddocks doing various jobs, and the horses follow me around. Quite often they're in my space when I'm trying to do things because they're curious and want to know what's going on. Sometimes they want to have a fight around me. Wasn't it Rocky Rooster? It was you that shit in my tack shed. So I am aware of them and what they're doing, even if I'm busy focused on the job. And I also expect from them to be aware of me and what I'm doing. And if I think they've been intrusive versus just being curious, I take my space back, and I don't do it by being mean or harsh. I'll just shoo them off. But I'm not scared of my horses. I'm not scared of the size of my horses. I'm not scared that they're going to do things to me. But I see a lot of problematic behaviours in horses occurs when the owner inadvertently is carrying anxiety and fear inside of them, which they project onto the horse, particularly when they pick up the horse's lead. So the horse goes onto high alert and thinks, what's going on? Something's wrong. And they start to act out. So I've seen this in so many different videos, and it could be that somebody's like generally not frightened of horses, but they come across one horse that rocks their confidence. Maybe there was an incident that happened, or things have gone wrong somewhere along the way. And look, I understand that, because we've all had unfortunate incidences with horses. But it can rob you of your joy if you've got this underlying fear constantly inside of yourself, thinking your horse is going to intentionally or unintentionally step on you or bite you or kick you or hurt you. And that fear can be so prevailing over your life, it just robs you of your joy and your time spent with that particular horse or horses. So this brings me to my point of being mindful of your space and teaching your horse to be mindful of your space. I'm not saying that you have to drive them out of your space all the time, because as you can see, I rarely do that. Most of the time when I'm doing work around the place, the horses are right next to me. Their noses are in there, their heads are down, or my head's down right next to their feet. But I will tell you this, is that they are absolutely mindful of my space in the same way as they're mindful of a foal. They treat me with respect in that sense, even though they're still curious and they want to be a part of what I'm doing. They're 100% aware of where I am all the time. If I think, and I can feel tension when there's tension in the air between the two of them, if I think that there's going to be a rumble, I send them off so that I don't get stepped on or I don't inadvertently be the recipient of one of their rumbles. And so that's common sense that I use. When you allow your own common sense to run you rather than your fear to run you, it enables you to work around your horses safely and know when you need to pull back and give them that space, or when you need them to be out of your space and you push them back. So it's about learning to read your horses and to understand where they're coming from versus where you're coming from internally. So you might also notice that when I'm working in the paddocks or whatever I'm doing, Bill's right on my tail and following along. So part of that for him is natural curiosity. He wants to know what I'm up to and where I'm going. Also, he's very bonded to me, so he likes to be a part of anything I'm doing. And he's always hopeful there's a game or maybe a treat involved. For many people, they would find that frightening. Sometimes Bill will rush up from a distance and I will remind him that he needs to respect my space. And I might do little things like when I'm walking along and I can hear him coming up behind me at a fairly good pace, I'll just swish my arms backwards and forwards behind me, a bit like a horse that swishes its tail. And that signals to him to slow up and not to come up on top of me. So if you have little fears about your horses running over you or doing things, teach them hand signals to indicate to them before they run up on top of you that you don't want them to do that, that you want your space. Again, it's common sense. Another thing I was watching last night that made me think about this was I was watching Tristan from TRT again. And one of the first thing he does with out of control or overexcited horses that have got problems is he teaches them about space and about how to control their bodies in that space. And once you start to master that with your horses, there's a lot less incidents because your horse becomes aware that all they have to really think about is managing their bodies in their own space and not in your space. I was also watching a funny video with Matt Haneker and his mum, who he wanted to teach her how to handle a horse. Now, Matt's mother was absolutely beside herself with fear over every aspect to do with a horse. She loved horses, and but she's just terrified that the horse was going to do terrible things because she was scared of the horse. And it was a good video because what Matt showed her was that her fears were unfounded, that the horse had no intention of harming her. But because she was convinced in her own mind that the horse was going to pick up on her fear, and because it picked up on her fear, it was going to act out, she was a nervous wreck. And look, she's not a horse handler, but I've seen that sort of behaviour, even in experienced people who've had something go wrong, like the horse has had a bad day or an off day and it's reared up, or it's done something where it's got frightened and spooked terribly and someone's come off and had an accident. And all of a sudden they start to become fearful of their horses, and because they're fearful inside when they're handling their horses, they assume that the horse is going to pick up that fear and start to be reactive towards it. Horses do have common sense. They're not mindless creatures that just act on a human's fears or anxieties. People got to come away from that thinking and realise that even if you are feeling like that inside, you can overcome that fear by simply being consistent in your handling and your behaviour around your horses versus what's going on inside of your heart or mind. Often an anxious horse or a horse that has trouble controlling its body is the result of the owner. Because the owner keeps projecting to the horse, something's wrong, something's wrong. As soon as the horse leaps or jumps or does something that, because of their size, that the owner begins to fear, the horse reacts to it physically, not really understanding what's going on, and they become anxiety prone. So they start to get pushy, they start to close in on your space. All kinds of silly little things start to happen, and the more that this happens, the more the owner starts to fret. Um, and it's like a negative chain reaction. And usually the point is where the lead is. So the person holding onto the lead transmits the fear. They transmit the anxiety up through the horse's head and into its body without realizing it, because they're all that internalized pressure and fear that they're carrying themselves is transported to the horse, and the horse is going, well, something's wrong, something's going on, or I don't trust this situation. And especially if they're a sensitive horse or they're a dominant horse, they might think, hang on, there's a battle to be had here. Or if they're a sensitive horse, they think, hell, I'm going to get out of here, first opportunity. So you've got to really think about what you're projecting, particularly when you've got a lead rope attached to your horse's head and you're feeling fearful about their size and your space. One of the reasons you don't often see me use a halter and lead rope is because, number one, I don't need to, because I've taught my horses to be aware of my space, and also that I'm not frightened of them and that I enjoy their company. So it's something that you develop over a period of time. It's a relationship that you develop with your horses that has to be started on a basis of trust. If you don't trust your horse, you will always fear your horse. And so what I try to reinforce every day to my horses is that I can handle them without having to control their heads and control their body, but simply through that trust and that relationship building, also teaching them about my space. It's not something that I'm hard and fast over, but it's a natural, normal process for them and me. So you'll often see me grooming the horses or asking Bill to do training with me, and I don't use anything other than my arm and the occasional treat to explain to him what I want him to do or to follow me, to do little fun games with me. He's always aware of my body. Even when he's been excited, he's aware of my body. He's probably better at it than Bella, but Bella's got a hell of a lot better. In the early days, she was nowhere near aware of her body as Belle was. But I didn't hold that against her, or I didn't get frightened of her. I had to be cautious around her because I didn't want to be accidentally run over by her. Um, but it's always teaching them to respect your space, so that you don't end up having an accident, or them accidentally running you over, or accidentally kicking you when they're aiming for another horse, or accidentally biting you when they're aiming for another horse. It's teaching them to be mindful, but in a very gentle and respectful way, and that happens over a period of time. But in order to do that, you've got to let go of your fear, because it's your fear that stops you from succeeding with your horses. The other thing I notice, which only increases fear, is when a horse is feeling slightly anxious. I quite often see horses shoving their owners and their owners shoving them back, and or you see horses nipping at their owners and the owners are shoving the horses back, and it becomes tick for tack, push shove, push shove, push shove. And it even becomes to an unconscious point where owners do it with their horses, not even realizing that they're doing it. It just becomes like a normal thing for them. So it's a pattern of negative reinforcement that happens, and it's usually anxiety based. So the owner's anxious, the horse is anxious, the owner's trying to gain control, the horse is trying to gain control. And it's cyclic. It builds and it builds and it builds till it gets out of control, and inevitably they end up at someone's horse clinic, with the trainer trying to teach better behaviour to both the owner and the horses. But underlying is a fear and a pretending that they're not really frightened of their horse, or So or they misread the horse, which is another problem too, is that people seem to think that it's cute if their horse pushes and shoves them around. Now, I'm not saying that horses have to be perfectly behaved all the time. I mean, look, we'd like them to, but let's be real, they're animals and they're sentient beings and they have their own thoughts and feelings. But you've got to stay on top and like you teach your own children manners, if you've got a mummy type personality, you need to teach your horses manners and allowing them to shove you around and push you backwards and forwards and not respect your space usually occurs for two reasons. One, you're trying to display to the world and to the horse that you're in control and you're not. Two, it's a habit that is negative and it only reinforces negativity and insecurity in both the horse and the owner. And number three, underneath there's a fear that if you stop the horse, it'll do something even more. And what happens, it becomes a fear of escalation. So do you escalate the issue with the horse that's pushing and shoving you around and try to display your own dominance? And usually people who do that try to display their own dominance. It's because they have no other skill base and underneath they're fearful. So they think if I prove to the horse I'm bigger and tougher, which is absolutely ridiculous when you're dealing with a 500 kilo plus horse. So how do you manage it? You manage yourself first, you manage your fear first, and don't escalate. So if anything, you've got to do the opposite, which is to de-escalate your own emotions and give yourself thinking space. Don't just be reactive. Pause, stop, think about what you're doing. And in all honesty, 99% of the time, what you need to do is focus on the space in front of you and own the space on the ground, not the horse. Get the horse to focus on the space in the ground and go, you're not coming into this. And every time you do, I'm just going to wave my arms around like a windmill if you have to, until the horse backs out of that space. And as soon as it starts to de escalate yourself. Don't yell, don't strike out, don't lecture. Just stand your ground and be peaceful. And as soon as the horse steps in again, do it again. So you're reinforcing your space and saying it's not acceptable for you to come and shove and push me around. So, little things that you learn over a period of time, and they should be an automatic process. But if they're not, it means usually that you've got a bit of insecurity or you're overcompensating for that insecurity and anxiety that you're carrying around. Another way to stop yourself accidentally getting into trouble with your horse is to be aware of their cues. If you watch this little section of the video, you see that Billy walks up to Bella. He gives her the nod with his head and asks her to move. Now, she had her head buried down in the hay, but she was still aware of what was going on. And so today she decided to oblige and she moved over so they could share. If we miss those cues that the horse gives us, and we do it repeatedly, the horse quite often becomes frustrated with us and inevitably starts to act out, whether it be a nip or a shove or escalates. And then all of a sudden you think, oh, I'm frightened of my horse. What's it going to do next? But usually there's a beginning process where this happens, and that's when you're too busy in the stable or getting organised, your mind's on other things, and you're not paying attention to those cues. I've read some horror stories where new and inexperienced owners have walked out into the paddock and they've decided to get their horse without reading the horse's reaction. So they've got a new horse, they don't know anything about it. They stroll up, the horse lays its ears back, and wham, they get bitten and they're shocked. And usually it's because, number one, they have no understanding of their new horse. Number two, they're unable to read their horse, or it might be, say, for example, a horse is feeding and the new owner goes out and decides to groom that horse because, hey, the horse is still and this is a fun time to bond. And the horse gives signals and says, no, I don't want you to do that. And then the inexperienced owner goes to themselves, oh, well, I've read from experienced people that you've got to show who the horse is, who's the boss of the horse. And so they persist, and eventually they get nipped or they get kicked. And then a pattern of aggressive behaviour begins, and the owner becomes extremely frightened of their horse and wants to get rid of them. But usually they'll first of all write online and, help me, my horse is aggressive, and a heap of people keyboard warriors will get on and either lecture them or give them all kinds of advice. But really, it comes down to this. If you're inexperienced and you're a little bit frightened and you're compensating for that fear by being presumptuous and not reading your horse, you're more than likely to end up having troubles and ending up with a problematic horse, because you're being fear-based and fear-driven and presumptuous. So, in terms of handling your horses, you really have to think about what's going on inside of you first before you try to fix the problem horse. And on a final note, as you know, horses comes in all sizes and breeds and types and personalities, just like we do. And you'll always come up against a horse that you're not feeling that confident with. I see that quite often, even with experienced owners, that they come up against a horse that's just a handful and don't know how to deal with it. Look, the best advice I can give anyone is to never escalate up, escalate down. Give yourself time to pause and think about what you're doing. If you're rushing with an excitable horse, you're just going to translate that energy across to them, and it doesn't help you and it doesn't help your horse training. Consider the pause. Consider what's going on inside of you before you even get to that horse. Have you had a conversation in your head that's negative before you've even got to the horse? Think about what's going on inside of you, because that can make the difference between whether you have a good relationship with your horse or a negative one.